Hello BookTube, how's it going? This is Alex back again with another video. Today I want to talk about how to start writing a novel. Um, you may be asking yourself, Alex, you have not yet finished writing a novel, so like who are you to be giving advice about how to write a novel, how to start a novel? Well, I'd say you're right. I have not yet successfully completed a novel, but I have pretty successfully started one. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Like I said in my intro video last week, part of what I want to use this channel for is to kind of like talk about my experience as I go through the process of trying to get my debut novel published. And so I'm gonna try to do these little like how-to kind of videos, like based on my own experience as I go along. So I'm kind of learning right along with the audience, and so far it's going pretty well. So we're just gonna give it a shot here and see how it goes. So lots of people out there want to write a novel, and lots of people are perfectly 100% capable of doing it. The hardest thing about doing it is doing it. Yeah, to sit there and grind it out, because writing a novel is a daunting task. It's a lot of words, it's a lot of sentences, it's a lot of chapters, and if you don't force yourself to kind of well, if you look at it, from the outside in. It's easy to be overwhelmed and intimidated by it and say, well, that's just too big of a project. Like I'm never going to be able to get to the end of it. And so that's why it's important to not approach it from that kind of standpoint. You need to approach it in more manageable bites, I guess you could say. Like how do you eat a whale one bite at a time? And that's writing a novel. So for me, I'll tell you about my experience of how I got started. So for me, I worked and I can see how there are two different ways to maybe go about this, or maybe more. But for me, I started big and kind of worked my way small, or from general to specific. I started off with a concept, or I guess you could say like a message that I wanted to try to express with my book. I said, okay, well, there's something that I want to say to the world. I had a specific kind of idea in mind of a theme or a message that I wanted to get across. And so that was kind of my starting point. Was okay, now given that that's what I want to say, what's the best way to go about saying it? So I worked from that general to that very broad, to a broad concept, and I kind of worked my way into the specifics. So the first thing was I came up with that theme, I came up with that message, and and then after that it took me a while. Like I said in the last video, it took me a while, but ultimately it hit me. Like I came up with an idea for the story itself. I said, okay, this would be a great scenario to express that idea that I wanted to get in mind, or to get out to the world. So that I had my concept, and then I had like a setting and like a scenario, and then after that I did a character profile for the main character, and I said, okay, well, I've got the concept, I've got the scenario and the setting. Who is the right character to express these ideas in this world that I'm going to build? And I sat down and I opened up a document, and I started doing bullet points, and just created a guy that I felt could get the point across in the story that I wanted to write. And it was just a simple process of opening up a document and just doing bullet points. It doesn't have to be anything really complicated. there are all sorts of things online about strategies for doing character profiles. I really didn't do anything too complicated. I just did bullet points, just the physical description, and his general kind of belief system, and what's kind of driving him as a character, like what's his personal motivation, and just some background, just a little bit of backstory that may or may not make it into the book itself, but was just important for me to know, as a writer, to help me understand who the character was. So then once you've got that, you've got your theme, you've got your setting, your scenario in mind, and you started working on your main character. And then at this point, maybe you could work out some other characters. I mean, the way my book is, it's pretty much just one character for most of the first half of the book. There's, and the second half, there's a lot more characters. But at first, it's a very, like, story focused, very much just on one person. So, but for a lot of people, you may want to also spend some time and develop some secondary characters. And then at that point, you're ready to start outlining. Now, like I said, writing a novel is a very daunting process if you look at it just from the starting point and saying, well, how am I ever going to get to the end? Well, part of what helps you get to the end is to take some time and plan it out. Now, I realize that, there's a whole big thing of like pantsers versus plotters, and people who can totally write by the seat of their pants and that works for them, more power to you. But I think especially for a first-time writer like me, who's just trying to complete a project, it was important for me to spend some time and kind of like map out where I'm going. So I didn't, come up with an extremely detailed outline at first. What I did was I just opened up another document and I just did a list of bullet points, and it was probably like 15 to 20 like plot points, just like events that I thought would probably have to happen to kind of get from where his starting point was going to be to where his ending point was going to be. And so it was very like general. And it was literally just a list of bullet points, like in chronological order of just general story beats. And so then once I had done that, at that point I started writing. I just started doing, because I kind of knew how I wanted to begin, so I just said, okay, well, I'm just going to go ahead and write the first chapter. And then once I had the first chapter, I said, okay, I can go ahead and write the second chapter. Once I had a couple chapters in and I kind of started see the story start to take shape, what I did was I started to go back to the outline and kind of flesh it out a little bit. I sort of took those 15 to 20 bullet points that I had and I started arranging them into like chapters, and then for each one I kind of like added in some more detail to each one. So I kind of had the first like 10 chapters I pretty much planned out from those kind of general bullet points. I kind of like made them each little bite-sized chunks and kind of like added a few more little points to each one. And so I will say that like even if you're writing in a plotting way like that, where you're trying to plan it out with an outline, you may find that as you're writing, the story starts going in another direction. That happened to me a couple times, where like as I was in the writing process, I got an idea for a scene or a chapter, and I just went ahead and wrote it. And I think it's important to just kind of go with that in a sense. And when you do that, don't be like, oh, well, I didn't outline that, so I can't write it. Go ahead and write it, and then go back and change the outline, so that you can make it fit. Because ultimately it's the end product that matters. There's, that's what matters. The other thing I will say that I kind of forgot to mention at the beginning was, depending on what kind of story you're writing, up front, you may want to do some research. I had to do that. I'm writing a story about. I've already said it on Twitter a bunch of times, so I might as well go ahead and say it. I'm writing a story about a doomsday prepper kind of guy, one of those people who obsessively plans and prepares for the end of the world. And so I went and did some reading and some research, both about like kind of who those people are who do that, and then also just learning some of the things that they learn, just so I could put myself in this character's shoes. So that was sort of actually like my first step was, once I kind of like had the concept in mind, before I really kind of started doing my bullet points, I just went and like read a bit about survivalism and prepping, so that I was kind of prepared to write. And so that's kind of it. Like that's how you start. You come up with an idea, you come up with a message, or whatever. Not everyone has like a message with what they're trying to say, and that's fine. I mean, for me, that's kind of like who I am. Like I wanted to try to like say something specific, but for other people, it might be coming up with a world. You may say, okay, I've got this really cool idea for this future society, or for a dystopian society, or for a fantasy world, and you just may have a really clear picture of like what that world is like, and then from that point you say, okay, well, what's a good story I can tell within that framework? That's totally legitimate. Like I said, I kind of worked from like a broad, vague kind of concept, and I worked down narrow. But people could also do the opposite of that, where you start just with your main character, and you just say, I've got a really clear picture of like who my main character is going to be. He's this, and that, or she's this, and that, and you write that down, and then you say, okay, well, once you get to know that character, then you can start coming up with a scenario and a story to drop them into, and throw things at them and kind of just see what happens. I kind of took the opposite approach, but either one of those is totally fine. So that's kind of it. Like that's how to start, and then once you have that outline, and once you kind of start seeing where you go, you just kind of like start taking those bites one at a time, and soon enough you start realizing that you're making progress. For me, just the other day, I hit 30,000 words on my manuscript. I'm aiming for probably 50,000, I would say, for the rough draft. I'm kind of an underwriter, so a lot of people like are overwriters, where they just pound it out, and like they end up with 150,000 words, and they've got to like trim it down. I'm the opposite, where I kind of like, I have my story points, and I write it out, and then I realize like, oh, that's not that many words, and I've got to like find a way to kind of like flesh it out. Maybe it's just because I'm like new at this kind of storytelling, but I'm starting to get the hang of it. But like just kind of as a matter of instinct or whatever, I'm sort of an underwriter, so my word count's a little low probably, but I think as I go through the revision process, I'm going to find ways to flesh it out and kind of maybe add some more scenes here and there. So I think by the time it's done, like I'm aiming for like 60 to 65,000 words. That seems like a good length for this story that I'm trying to tell. Right now, yeah, like I said, I'm at the 30,000 word mark. I'm kind of like muddling through the middle, as they say. I'm sort of at like a transitional scene, and I'm trying to come up with ways to make that interesting. Like I said, for my outline, I spent most of my time outlining like the first half, and I kind of like had an idea for the second half, but I knew it was going to involve like inventing a lot more characters, and so I kind of put that on the back burner. And I'm kind of like more pantsing my second half, just because I know where I'm going, and it's more just a matter of like coming up with situations to like lead to that. So it wasn't really totally necessary for me to like plot that all out, because like ultimately I like I know where it's heading. I just need to figure out how to get there, kind of like one piece at a time. And I didn't feel like I needed to do that all in advance. I did need to start the beginning of it in advance and plot that out, because like that was kind of the setup for everything. So it was important for me to like do that. But the second half, I'm doing it more by the seat of my pants. I'm kind of doing the outline like as I go, just maybe like a chapter in advance. And that's it. That's this week's video. I'm Alex Federley. Go ahead, and if you would, please like the video, subscribe to the video, or subscribe to my channel, I should say, and find me on Twitter. I'll put the link in there, and give me a follow on Twitter. I also have a writer Facebook page, so you know, you can go ahead and like and follow on Facebook as well. All the social media. That's what writers have to do these days, right? You can't just write a good book. You've got to be extremely online as well. So it's part of the game. That's what I'm doing. So happy writing, everybody.